Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultant channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. Today I want to talk to you about this Capital One data breach and some other related issues. And this may seem like a strange topic for a channel like this, but you have absolutely no idea how relevant it really is, and you have no idea how qualified I am to speak on this particular issue. The question is, how do I explain it to you without creating an hour-long video? I'm going to try really hard not to go into detail. Maybe I'll make a video later that gives you more of my history and why I know what I know and things like that, but suffice it to say, to make in the interest of brevity, because I want to get the point across about this breach, suffice it to say that back in the 90s I spent 4 years researching and writing a book about the weaponization of personal information, which was something that was brand new in human history. Intelligence gathering had always happened among kings and military leaders. You have to know your enemy, troop movements, things of that nature. You have to know those about groups and about important individuals. But the idea that there could be a financial value, a monetary value to personal information about Joe Schmo who does nothing but drink beer and beat up his wife in a trailer park, the idea that having personal information about that person could actually help you become more wealthy and more powerful, that was unheard of in human history. The idea that having detailed personal information about hundreds of millions of Joe Schmoes out there like you and me, and that you could benefit from that politically, financially, in terms of your desire to take authoritarian power over other people, that was unheard of in human history. It was always just, you have to have information about these masses, these groups, and you have to have information about the, what you might call the VIPs, the important people. You know, the people who run the show, the people with the money, the families with the history, the leadership, that kind of thing. Computers fundamentally changed everything. They gave us the ability to gather all this information about individuals. When I was in graduate school, that's what they were doing, and it sickened me. That's why I left graduate school. There was no morality attached to it whatsoever. There wasn't any such thing as morality. It was just, here's the research, do it. And if I pointed out, yeah, but what we're doing could cause this problem down the line, and if you look at the way human history has gone and the way that every tool like this has been weaponized, it's pretty much 100% that what we're doing is going to be turned into a weapon against the people. They would just say, you know, if you have a problem with this, you're welcome to leave the university. We're not holding you here with a ball and chain, you know. That's what they would say. And if you've ever worked at a job where you raise the issue, it's like, you know, the product we're selling is actually killing babies. I kind of have a problem with that. And they say, well, I'm sorry, are you not happy here? If you're not happy here, you know, maybe you should consider, you know, possibly finding employment somewhere else where you might be a little happier. They turn it around to you like you're the problem. And that's what happened to me in graduate school. It's like, what we're doing here is going to allow the enslavement of the entire human race. You don't have a moral problem with that? And they didn't even understand what morality was. Like, academia is a cult. And when you're in a cult, the ideas of morality and ethics, they go out the window. Because the only ethics and morality there is what your cult stands for. And these guys just stood for, I won't even get into that. Like I said, not trying to make an hour-long video. My point is that I have a long history in the idea of information being weaponized. I spent those 4 years researching and writing a book on it. I still think it's, at the time, there was nothing like it. And can you believe it? Nobody would publish it because they would tell me, you're crazy, this will never happen, this is nonsense, who's going to read something like this? That's what I was told over and over and over again. The only person out of all the people I went to, I mean, this is back when, well, again, I don't want to get into that either, but the only person who really took it seriously was Ralph Nader. when I sent it to him, and then I met him several months later, and he remembered it, and he did take it seriously, and he did try to connect me with some publishers. After the 4 years were up, I then spent 10 years trying to make a documentary film about this, because I learned from that experience that people don't read anymore, and that even television, I mean, the internet was just really taken off, but television had already dumbed people down to the point where they didn't read anymore, and their reading comprehension skills were pretty close to that. And our school system had just tanked into this pathetic indoctrination camp. So people didn't have the ability to read and understand. You know, way back when, if you read like 1984, back when it was published, which I think was in 47, 48, George Orwell's 1984, people were literate enough back then to realize what he was pointing out. Just like people, throughout, the last several hundred years, when they read Shakespeare, they comprehended that, wow, this guy has what an uncanny ability to take the human experience and distill it down into something that's succinct and that just touches you and touches your heart and your mind. That was the brilliance of Shakespeare. But now people are so illiterate that Shakespeare is just a bunch of hard reading and boring to people. Well, that's the problem I had with the book, because I came from the old school where you didn't get a book published unless you were qualified to do it. And 20 years earlier, I would have got the book published, but everything was changing. It was becoming more about a popularity contest than about truth and reality. So I was trying to make the documentary film, and I spent 10 years on that. So that's 14 years total of my life that I've spent all the money I've earned, dedicated all my time and effort, never watched television again, trying to basically help you and your family and your children and your grandchildren and your progeny, trying to save them from what is coming, which I saw back in the early 1990s. One of the things I talked about back then that no one had really heard of, I did not invent the term by any stretch, but I was one of the few people talking about it at that time. The term was identity theft. And just briefly to give you an idea, just a small idea of what identity theft is and why it's so important. Consider this. Let's say 1776, right? So back in the Continental Congress, or okay, they're getting ready to I don't know, they're going to write the Declaration of Independence. Okay, so they decide to break free of England, of the British Empire, and the American colonists say, we need to write a Declaration of Independence. So they choose someone to write it, and they choose a very good writer, very smart individual, Thomas Jefferson. So they say, okay, Thomas, go write this. So he goes to his hotel or what have you, goes to his room, and he writes the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events, and he starts writing out this beautiful text. Meanwhile, let's say the British get wind of this, and they know about it. They know that this is going on, and they want to stop it. So let's say they try this. They say, well, here's what we can do. We can kidnap Thomas Jefferson, put an imposter in his place, and have him give them a bogus Declaration of Independence that basically reaffirms their allegiance to England. And King George goes, sounds good to me, go for it. So Thomas Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence that we know. He gets on his horse and he starts riding toward, the Philadelphia or, Continental Congress, and the British kidnap him. They pull him off the horse, and then they put his clothes on some other guy who looks kind of like him, and he rides off and he heads into the Continental Congress. Now here's the thing. Those people knew Thomas Jefferson, right? Who is this guy going to fool? He's not Thomas Jefferson, doesn't look like Thomas Jefferson, probably doesn't smell like Thomas Jefferson, doesn't talk like him. Almost by definition, he's not as smart as Jefferson. Jefferson was one of the most brilliant people who's ever lived. Okay, everybody's going to know this is not Thomas Jefferson. So when he tries to present this Declaration of Independence that reaffirms their allegiance to England, it ain't going to work. Why? Because intelligence gathering back then, in the sense of learning information about other people, was very, very personal. And it was only directed at people who actually mattered. Okay, let's say Thomas Jefferson was writing, let's say he got a couple assistants. He needed someone to carry his trunk. He needed someone else to, I don't know, fill his pipe. I don't know. He's got servants or someone around him, okay? So he grabs them at the hotel and says, I need you to come with me. I'll give you 20 bucks. I'll give you 10 shilling, whatever, to do this. So they come along. The king isn't going to gather information about those two. They're a couple putzes. They're just low-level people like me and you, right? He's not going to sit there and gather. It's Jefferson that matters. So they're going to gather all the information they have about Jefferson is their intelligence gathering. Maybe his household and such, but you see what I mean? It's limited. So there was no effective way for someone to impersonate Thomas Jefferson, to steal his identity. It couldn't happen because his identity was him. It was the flesh and blood person. What happened with computers is instead of my identity being the person who's talking to you here, the flesh and blood that you can't feel right now, if we were meeting, we would shake hands. Now, our identities are letters and numbers and symbols that used to be on pieces of paper throughout the 20th century, and now they're electronic inside computers. And there's consequences to that, because now you can fake being somebody. You can steal their identity. It wasn't possible before. Now imagine, look at how world history would be different if they had been able to steal Thomas Jefferson's identity that way. But they couldn't. It wasn't possible. Now it's not only possible to steal Jefferson's identity, you can steal the identity of anyone in this country. Hundreds of millions of people. Now, today it might seem obvious, but you got to understand, 25 years ago when I was raising the alarm about this and I was trying to say, this is what they were having me doing in grad school. They were having me build the infrastructure for this. That's a public university. Tax dollars are paying for that. It's like they're paying for their own enslavement. And there's no morality amongst the professors and the so-called educators there. Nobody cared. Today, people are starting to care, and one reason they're starting to care is because of things like this Capital One data breach, and so many other data breaches that happen. Alright? It looks like the person who perpetrated this data breach was some androgynous thing. I don't know what it is. I thought it was Todd Rundgren at first, but apparently it's a woman. This hacker who decided, well, I'm just gonna, for whatever purpose, this person's probably loony, because you don't do that. You don't just say, well, unless you want to have the power to destroy an entire civilization, you don't do things like that. But apparently they took all this information about 100 million people and businesses, and they distributed it so that everyone has your personal information now if you've dealt with Capital One. Now, you can argue points about, well, Capital One didn't have enough security in there. It's like there is no security against this. I don't know what they put in place against it. I'm sure they did the best they could. They probably could have done more. Throughout my adult working career, I have fought that battle where any job I'm at, any place I'm at, I bring up the issue of protecting people's private information because it's more important than protecting their guns were 200 years ago. That's how important it is. When I fight this battle against these lunatics who run the state of Minnesota who don't fathom anything, they don't understand anything about the way this world works or the way it has worked throughout history. They sit there and tell me to fill out all these paper forms every time I want to just go in and get a free biscuit or something. Where homeless people come in, they want to get a meal. Fill out this form. Okay, I'd like to get a job. Well, we'll help you. Fill out this form. Of course, they never actually help them get a job. Fill out a form for every bloody thing you do. You know what? If you're homeless and you're filling out these forms that are associated with poverty and welfare and homelessness, your odds of getting a professional job in the future have pretty much gone down to zero, unless you know somebody or you meet somebody. You see, there's a reason why I don't want to fill out all these forms these people have. I know what information does to people. I know what a weapon that is. These ignorant fools don't have the slightest idea the kind of dynamite they're playing with when they sit there and they gather all this personal information about people who are already the most vulnerable people in society. Because all it's going to take is the right data breach to get their information, and guess what? Minnesota's 10,000 homeless people, their lives are over. Forever. Because we have set up a system that is founded on this information age. And we never should have done it. And while I'm ashamed of anything I had to do with that, participating in it, being in computer science, the fact is I left the field and I left graduate school on moral grounds because of how filthy that was, and because of where it was going, and because of the way that these ignorant fools in that university and elsewhere refused to have any morality. They refused to look at what they were doing and the impact it was going to have in the future on their own children, for heaven's sakes. These people don't even care about their own children and their grandchildren, who are going to be the ones who really suffer from this. They wanted to be published now. They wanted that PhD behind their name now. It was all about them. And in that sense, it's the same as it's been throughout human history. Stupid, arrogant, egoistic people who ruin the lives of everyone else because it serves their purposes. The battles I'm fighting here against homelessness and the ridiculous bureaucracy they've got that makes sure that people stay homeless in Minnesota and elsewhere, but in particularly in Minnesota that I'm dealing with, so much of this is founded in information gathering and sales. This data breach at Capital One, it depends what gets done with the information, but this has the potential to not just ruin lives, but to end lives forever. And if you're sitting there on the other end of this camera right now and going, "Oh, that'll never happen. That's crazy. How could you say something like that? They're not going to let that happen." That's exactly what I heard 25 years ago when I was publishing that book. And everyone said, identity theft? What a bunch of baloney. We're not going to publish that. What a bunch of crap. Now, it's front page news all the time. Identity theft. Data breach. It's just people don't even think twice when they hear those terms. In other words, I was right. And I gave up my life to try to get the word out about that 25 years ago. I gave up my life. I spent all the money I had. Instead of accumulating riches and wealth of my own, I financed everything I did. I financed my own research on that. I financed my attempts to make that documentary film, which involved traveling the whole nation. I spent every penny I had. One reason I was in an unstable position to where when what happened with my neighbors and losing the job at the same time sent me into this position is because I did not save any money throughout my life up to that time, because I spent it all on that project to try to save you and your children and your grandchildren from this very threat. And nobody listened to a word I said. They said I was the crazy one. Now, 20 years later, sorry, Paul, I guess you were right all along. You know, this is one reason why I point out ironies and injustices in these videos so often. You got to understand what it's like to be in the situation I'm in. I devoted my entire life to helping other people. I'm not trying to be a savior or anything like that. The point is, I was in a position where I had information that the people needed to protect themselves from these menacing entities. Number one being the government above all others. Some putz hacks into Capital One, steals their information, and she's got her face on the front page of the national newspapers. And there's still no news talking about my story here. Do you see why I'm upset? Do you see why it's a little bit unjust, a little twisted? One last thing I'd like to say on this, in this region at least, I don't know about where you're at, in this region, in the last couple years, Speedway has taken over, it seems like, all of the gas stations. It isn't quite all of them, but it sure seems like it. Speedway. Whenever you go into now, I've seen these gas stations where I've gone in so many times. As they turn into a Speedway, everything changes, and the employees become, shall we say, less happy than they were before. One reason for that is because they are now ordered to say to everyone, got your Speedy Rewards card? And if the person says no, do you want one? And if the person says no, they are told to take one of these Speedy Rewards cards and scan it in and hand it to you anyway. Even if they know you're going to throw it in the trash, they're going to hand it to you anyway. The question is, why is a gas station so concerned with gathering your personal information? They're so concerned with it that they would reduce their own employees with this kind of indignity, that they would humiliate them like that, make them do something. It's like, I'm sorry, but when I went in there, you know, when this one gas station converted to a Speedway, and the lady said, you have your Speedy Rewards card? And I was like, no, thank you. And she said, do you want one? And I said, no. And she scanned it and handed it to me, and I just got really upset, and I just said, no! I said, no means no! If I say no, don't give me that thing! And I'm getting upset. In my mind, I'm thinking back over the last 30 years where I've been involved in this, fighting against this information gathering. And this lady had the audacity to look at me and say, well, it's just to help you get rewards, it's going to benefit you. And I'm just like, you know, I spent 30 years trying to help people like that. People who are so oblivious and ignorant, who don't even think that they, I hate to say it, but so many people out there really deserve the enslavement they're going to get. They really deserve it because they've been irresponsible their entire lives with it. The problem is, I haven't been. From the very beginning, when I noticed what was going on in the early 90s, I have been fighting against it with everything I've got. Not just for me, but for you as well. And I'm living in this car. One reason for it is because I drained all the resources I earned throughout the first 20 years of my adult life trying to get this information to you. First through a book and then through documentary film. And I just never had the resources to do it. By the time I learned how to make films, it was too many years into it. My money was gone. Nobody would help finance it because no one else understood the severity of the problem. Well, now they're starting to understand the severity of the problem. In a previous life, I would say something like, you should boycott Speedway until they stop using those Speedy Rewards cards. Or at least until they stop pushing them like drug pushers on people. And trying to shame people when they don't accept this weapon. There's a reason why a gas station wants to know what you're buying, where you're buying it, when you're buying it, how often you're buying it, and what method of payment you're using to buy it. There's a reason they want that information. Think about it. It's a gas station. It's a gas station. Why would they want your personal information? I'm trying so hard to get people to think for once. There's a reason why they want you to use that card. And I'm getting upset because I've spent the last 30 years on this and you haven't. So I'm just going to go now. I hope you got something out of this video. Apologies if it's disorganized. But when I saw that Capital One data breach, this piping hot boiling tea kettle just went because I can't take it anymore. I can't take the stupidity out there. I can't take the ignorance, the irresponsibility of these people who don't understand what a serious problem this is, who didn't deal with it 25, 30 years ago when I was trying to, and even today they still try to hand out these stupid Speedy Rewards cards, and they still don't even fathom what's behind it. Meanwhile, the one person who's trying to warn them, the one person who's actually trying to help them, is living in a freaking car. But I don't want to get upset. So I'm going to turn off the camera, and I'm going to grab a guitar, and I'm going to enter Never Never Land with some music. But I can do that. I've earned the right to do that because I've spent the last 30 years working on this. When you're done watching this video, why don't you spend some time thinking about it? Let's see if Speedway can get deluged with 100,000 emails or letters or phone calls or so from people saying, don't ever push that card on me ever again, and keep it away from my children, because I know what you're doing now. Let's see if that happens to Speedway, or if things just keep on going the way they're going. I've already done all I can do to save you guys, to help you, to educate you on that regard for decades. I literally gave up my life for that. I gave up having a family of my own for that purpose. And this is the reward I get. Can you people please do something? When you turn this camera off, think about this, research it, and talk to other people about it. Send them to these videos so that they can learn from my experience. Please, don't let everything I've done and other people who've done the same thing as me go to waste. We gave up our lives to try to make sure that this kind of thing could never happen. To make sure that a gas station never needs to know what size underwear you wear. We did what we could to prevent that, but the masses were asleep the whole time. They were watching television, drinking beer. There's no way to make these videos without getting angry. And I'll tell you what, brother and sister, if you were sitting in this chair right now staring at this camera, you'd be mad as hell as well. I promise you that. Despite all that, I am very grateful to you for watching. Really. I mean, that's why I'm making these things. So keep watching. As long as you do, I'll try to keep them coming, alright? Thank you so much. Protect yourself and your family, alright? Tell Speedway that they can go to